Hey guys, tonight we're travelling far from the lights of modern cities, back to an ancient world carved in stone and echoing with distant roars. Before we begin, I'd love it if you shared your location and what time it is where you are. I always find it fascinating how people from every corner of the world fall asleep to the same soft stories. Now, take a deep breath. Let your shoulders drop. Maybe you're already wrapped in your favourite blanket, or slowly sinking into your pillow. Make yourself cozy. Let your eyes grow heavier with each passing moment. Tonight's journey will be gentle, calm, and full of quiet wonder. Let me take you to the shadow beneath the glory, to a secret world hidden under the Colosseum. You wake in silence, not in your own room, not in your own time. The linen you lie on is coarse, stretched over a bed of straw, and the air smells faintly of iron, old dust, and oil. You're not in danger, you're safe here. You are a quiet observer, a drifting soul placed gently in another time to witness, to understand. The sounds come softly first. Above your head, distant footsteps, the murmur of Latin speech, and something deeper, a low rhythmic thumping, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. You rise slowly from the cot. The stone beneath your feet cool, the light dim. You're in a room deep under the Colosseum, somewhere in the Hypogeum, the underground maze of tunnels and chambers that lie beneath the great Roman arena. Here, the sun never touches the floor. The flickering torches in the walls throw long, moving shadows across the stone. You walk quietly, your footsteps muffled by sand and straw. The corridor stretches forward, and you follow it, turning a slow corner into the heart of Rome's hidden machinery. The Colosseum above is a masterpiece of engineering, yes, but what lay beneath it was an eerie marvel few ever saw. You find yourself surrounded by massive wooden winches, their ropes thick and worn, their gears groaning as they turn, operated by sweaty workers in silence, like ghosts moving through rituals older than memory. Each mechanism once raised wonders into the light of the arena, cages of leopards, tigers, or gladiators, lush props for staged hunts, even entire trees to simulate wild African forests. You imagine them lifting slowly through the trapdoors, pushed by unseen forces like magic to the roaring crowd above. Yet down here, everything is quiet. You can hear your own breath. A soft breeze brushes past. It's not from above, but from some side vent or unknown corridor. The Romans had ventilation shafts built through the underground system, an attempt to cool this labyrinthine basement and whisk away the stench of blood and animal musk. But now it carries a chill, and with it the whisper of history. You keep walking, your fingers tracing the edge of a crumbling wall. Along it there are faint marks, etched by hand, scratches, symbols, even words. Perhaps a gladiator, waiting his turn above, carved a prayer to Mars. Or perhaps it was a frightened worker, trapped in a system larger than himself. You imagine life here, not in the grandstands under the sun, but in the underbelly, in the shadow of spectacle. You pass small rooms, storage for costumes and props. A pile of fake boulders lies unused, wrapped in linen. A set of rusting spears leans in the corner. Above you, a dull thud echoes down, the sound of a wooden lift reaching the arena level. A door creaks open, then silence again. Every movement down here was choreographed with precision. There were over 30 elevators, operated with counterweights and manpower, timed perfectly to the dramas above. You pause before one now. Its ropes creak gently in the dark, as if remembering the thousands of bodies, animal and human, that once passed through its square wooden platform. You sit for a moment on a smooth stone ledge, just breathing. It's a strange place to find peace, but there's a rhythm here, the rhythm of mechanisms, of silent labour, of ancient breath held in eternal suspense. Above you, the Colosseum may have roared, but down here, all was timing, patience, and shadows. You lean back, letting the sounds fade into a low hum. The flickering torchlight dances against the curved ceiling. You feel distant and safe, like the weight of history is pressing down like a warm blanket, wrapping you in layers of time. Nothing will disturb you here. The secrets of the Colosseum are just beginning to whisper. You don't know how long you've been here beneath the Colosseum, but it doesn't matter. Time feels different underground, slower, more ancient. You stand once more, your body moving with a dreamy ease, as though the weight of the centuries makes your steps quieter. You continue walking. The corridor narrows, the torchlight flickers more nervously here, throwing long, finger-like shadows across the stone walls. You can see faint soot marks on the ceiling where countless flames once burned, day and night, lighting this subterranean stage for those who operated it, out of sight, out of mind. You are surrounded by the legacy of quiet labour. They called it the hypogeum, meaning underground, but it was more than that. It was a theatre in its own right, an unseen world of ropes, pulleys, and the breath of men whose names were never written down. You pause before one of the vertical shafts. You gaze upward, and it's like looking into a narrow well of silence. This too was once an elevator, one of many. You imagine a large wooden cage being pulled up by men working in unison, their hands calloused, their muscles straining in the gloom. The technology was extraordinary for its time. Roman engineers crafted a system of lifts and levers so precise that at the emperor's signal, a dozen wild animals could appear at once through hidden trapdoors, snarling, blinking into the sunlight, with a crowd of 50,000 erupting in awe. But you hear no crowd. Only the faint creak of the ancient ropes swaying gently overhead, a ghost of movement. You walk past rows of shallow cages now, long, rectangular enclosures with barred wooden doors. Some are still intact, their iron hinges rusted but still clinging on. These were holding pens for the beasts, lions from Numidia, elephants from North Africa, crocodiles from the Nile. Rome's hunger for wonder knew no bounds. You imagine one of those creatures here, pacing slowly in the dark, its world reduced to a few paces in each direction. What did it think? Did it sense the crowd above? Did it smell the fear and blood? You pause beside one cage, placing your hand lightly on its frame. The wood is dry and splintered beneath your fingertips. A faint claw mark is still visible across the back wall, as if whatever was trapped inside had tried, in its final hours, to break free. You move on. Ahead, you see what looks like a raised platform surrounded by wooden beams and a set of pulleys overhead. It's one of the animal lifts, restored in modern times, but the wood and iron are still original in places. This was no crude device. Roman engineers devised a system of capstans, each manned by a team of 8 slaves or workers, to rotate and power the ascent of these lifts. Imagine it now. The animal is loaded onto the platform. Men take their places at the capstans. With perfect timing, they begin to push, shoulders bent low, feet scraping against the stone. The ropes tighten, the lift begins to rise. Slowly, smoothly, the platform ascends through a vertical shaft, lined with wooden rails and bronze guides. Up above, the arena waits, but you are not going up. You are staying here, where the light is soft and the walls feel like they are holding their breath. You step into one of the side chambers. This one has no windows, no torches, just stone and silence. You close your eyes for a moment, and you can almost hear the heartbeat of the Colosseum, the quiet groan of gears, the heavy exhale of animals, the whispered prayers of a gladiator waiting for his turn above. Every piece down here was part of something larger, a machine designed not just for entertainment, but for power, for control. The emperor could press a finger to the armrest of his throne, and with that single gesture set entire systems in motion. Life and death decided by levers and ropes, unseen hands, hidden cages. You sit, once more, against the curved stone wall, the weight of history folding gently over you. Beneath the Colosseum, every shadow told a story. Every creaking rope, every worn groove in the stone, every claw scratch was a quiet reminder of the people and creatures who lived and died for spectacle. It stays with you like a thin veil draped over the world. Even as you rise once more from your resting place along the cold stone wall, there's no urgency, no hurry. The Colosseum above may have demanded speed, spectacle and blood, but down here, time is slow, measured in soft footfalls and creaking beams. You move again, deeper into the hypogeum. The corridors grow narrower now, more crooked, as though you are slipping into the memory of the Colosseum itself. Some areas were never meant for visitors. These were working passages, utilitarian, unfinished, carved hastily in the early days of construction, and then expanded as the underground grew more complex. You run your hand along the rough stone, tracing the tool marks still visible in the wall. Roman slaves and labourers, sweating in the dark, would have chipped away at this rock by torchlight, hour after hour, to make room for what would become one of the most intricate backstage systems in the ancient world. A faint draught finds you again. It brings the scent of something old, not unpleasant, just forgotten. The air carries traces of oil, ash, damp earth, and a whisper of bronze. You follow it. The corridor opens into a larger chamber, dimly lit, with the soft sound of dripping water echoing in the corner. You're in one of the control rooms now, if such a word even fits. This is where the great winches were anchored. Massive vertical shafts connect to wooden lifting devices above, long since still but once vital to the mechanics of illusion. You approach one of them, a tall wooden frame, reinforced with iron bands, crowned by a horizontal wheel worn smooth from use. The ropes are gone now, but the grooves they wore into the wood remain, deep, persistent, permanent. You imagine the sounds, the rhythmic grind of the wheel turning, the strain of the chords, the low shout of a foreman timing the ascent. Parati, ready, then a thud, then the lift rising toward the light, while those below watched their work disappear into the sun. The underground space was not simply one long hall, it was a city unto itself. Over 2 levels, with more than 30 elevators, dozens of animal cages, and a precise system of signals to coordinate each moment with the arena floor. Coloured flags, horns, spoken commands, all designed to make chaos seem like choreography. And in this hidden world there were people like you, not gladiators or beasts, but the invisible ones, the ones who oiled the gears, who hauled the ropes, who cleaned the cages before dawn. Slaves, labourers, prisoners of war. Many lived down here for weeks at a time, sleeping near their posts, eating by candlelight, never once seeing the sky. You pass by a small alcove, a hidden nook carved into the wall. Inside, a broken oil lamp rests on a flat stone. Beside it, a Roman coin, green with age. And drawn into the soot-covered stone above it, a simple shape, the outline of a dog. Perhaps a name was scratched once beneath it, long worn away. You pause here, and for a moment, it feels like someone is still here, watching from the shadows, not with malice, but with memory. A worker who once lit his lamp here each morning, who once held the rope that raised the gate that released the bear that made the crowd roar. He never saw the games. But the games would not happen without him. You kneel quietly, paying respect, not to emperors or warriors, but to this unknown figure, who stood in the darkness while others stood in the light. And then, slowly, you rise and move forward. Far ahead you glimpse something new, a faint golden glow from an open space. You move toward it, your footsteps hushed against the ancient stones. The chamber ahead is unlike the others, taller, arched, almost cathedral-like in its design. This was where the animals were first brought in, led from carts through narrow tunnels. They were chained here briefly before being caged, studied by handlers who understood wild nature better than the senators who watched them die. Even here, even now, you feel their presence, not as fear, but as awe, the breath of a lion, the steady stare of an elephant, creatures that once crossed oceans and deserts only to vanish beneath this place. You sit down near one of the archways, leaning back against the wall. Down here, the show has ended. The crowd is gone. The noise is only memory. What's left is stone and wood and the slow, steady rhythm of something ancient resting. You stir slowly now, as if waking in the midst of a dream rather than from it. The stillness remains, but there's something different in the air, an almost imperceptible pulse like a heartbeat deep within the walls. You listen for a moment, unmoving, letting the feeling settle around you. Then, gently, you rise. You find yourself in another corridor, one you don't remember entering. The light is softer here, as though the shadows have aged into something gentler, more knowing. You take slow steps forward, your fingers brushing against the stone once again. There's something grounding in that, tracing the paths that others once walked, long before you. As you move, You begin to notice more details, subtle ones. Scratches on the walls where carts scraped past. A rusted nail left lodged in a corner beam. The brittle remnant of a feather half buried in dust. Signs of life, of movement, of purpose. This was a place of design, not chaos. You pause at a wide intersection where several narrow tunnels meet like the spokes of a wheel. In the centre is a square opening in the floor, surrounded by rotting timbers and ancient pulleys. One of the many vertical lifts. Some historians believe these elevators could support up to 300 kilograms, enough to hoist a lion, or a fully armoured gladiator, through the floor of the arena. The mechanism was clever. Each elevator was counterweighted by large stones and powered by manpower alone, strong backs pushing wooden capstans in unison, the ropes creaking like bones in the dark. You imagine it now, the whistle of a horn, the command shouted in Latin, then the lift begins to rise. Guided by bronze rails, its movement silent to the spectators above. A moment of awe or surprise from beneath, but the hands that made it happen remained hidden, invisible. You think again of those faceless workers, Roman engineers, slaves, trained handlers, communicating with subtle signs, crouching in narrow passageways, sweating beneath the glow of oil lamps. Their world was not of sunlight and applause, but of wood and weight and whispering wheels. You kneel beside the lift and run your fingers along the edge of the shaft. The old timbers are brittle now, the iron bindings rusted, but still holding their shape. The Romans knew how to build things to last. A little further on you find a side chamber, lower, closer to the ground. You step down into it. It's quiet, tighter. The walls curve inward slightly, and on one side a strange structure, a wooden frame with a simple sliding panel and a latch. A hidden door, perhaps once used to store weapons or spare props, or maybe something else. You imagine it opening, and from behind it an actor emerging, painted in mythic colours, dressed as a god or beast, ready to appear through a trapdoor above. These weren't just executions or battles. They were performances, elaborate reenactments of myths and legends staged with exacting care. The Romans called them venationes and munera, hunts and combats, but sometimes they told stories of heroes swallowed by monsters, of gods descending to earth, and all of it required planning. And places like this, you sit here for a moment, quiet. The floor beneath you is hard, but it holds centuries of silence, softened by time. You let your back rest against the wall, your body easing into the quiet space. The air is dry and faintly sweet, with the scent of old wood and forgotten oils. A single drip of water echoes from somewhere distant. You wonder how many lived and worked down here, year after year, preparing the drama above, feeding the animals, repairing the lifts, cleaning the blood, and then repeating it all the next day. A living machine running behind the scenes. They didn't wear armour, they didn't carry swords, but without them the spectacle would have failed. You close your eyes again, and you picture the Colosseum above, not filled with screams but resting quietly under a blue Roman sky, its walls casting long shadows over the forum, its corridors echoing only with the cries of birds. For now, in this forgotten room beneath a forgotten stage, you may rest. You wake gently, as if the walls themselves have allowed you to stir. The air hasn't changed, still dry, still thick with the dust of centuries, but something in the stillness feels new. Your eyes adjust to the dim light, the flickering shadows cast by unseen torches. You rise, slowly, quietly, as if not to disturb whatever memories still sleep in the corners of this stone labyrinth. Your steps are slower now, not out of caution, but respect. This place, this forgotten world beneath the Colosseum, begins to feel like a cathedral of silence. Every stone you pass has seen more than you could imagine, and in that knowledge there is peace. You follow the corridor until the path widens into a larger chamber. It's darker here, deeper. The ceiling rises high above you, forming a vaulted arch, still blackened with soot from ancient oil lamps. Across the far wall, you see it. Tall, wide, flanked by two half-collapsed stone pillars. A gate. Not ornamental, not ceremonial, functional, worn. The Porta Bestiaria, the gate through which the animals entered. You approach slowly. You can almost feel the cold breath of the past flowing from the mouth of the tunnel beyond. This is where the beasts were brought in from their long journeys, dragged in wagons, caged in carts, walked under whip and shout from the distant provinces of the empire. Africa, Asia Minor, Germania. They called them exotica, lions, panthers, giraffes, even rhinos, brought to Rome not for study or awe, but for blood. The more unusual the creature, the louder the cheer when it was slain. But before they faced the sunlight and the swords, they passed through here. You step across the threshold. The stone beneath your feet has been worn smooth, not by weather but by thousands of paws, hooves and bare feet. You look down and notice grooves in the floor, marks from wheels, scratchings from claws, a small fossil of movement preserved in rock. Imagine the noise here once, the barking of dogs, the panicked cry of an ostrich, the bellow of an elephant denied light. And above it all, the murmured voices of handlers, trainers and guards, keeping order, preparing the show, all of it in service to a moment that lasted only minutes in the arena. You pass the gate, and the passage narrows once more, curling into the lower tunnels. Here the light fades to nearly nothing, but your eyes adjust. Shapes emerge from the gloom, more cages, stacked wooden crates, a shattered amphora. This is where the animals were kept before their moment in the sun. Each cage is different, some built for birds, others reinforced for bears or bulls. You stop before one, its bars still stained a strange dark colour. Rust, or something older. A heavy iron collar lies discarded on the floor beside it. You crouch quietly, peering inside. Empty. But the space holds memory. You can feel it. The Romans saw animals as entertainment, but here in the dark it's hard to see them as anything other than frightened passengers. Their journey across land and sea ended in this small cell beneath a world they couldn't comprehend. You rise again and continue. Past the cages is another chamber, lower still. The floor here is layered with dirt and old straw, swept into piles long ago and never touched again. You notice a small ring bolted into the ground, a tether point for ropes or chains. You don't dwell on it. Instead, your attention drifts upward. Above you, faint beams of light pierce through thin slats, trapdoors, square openings in the wooden arena floor above. You're directly beneath the stage of it all now. Some of these openings were fitted with spring-loaded hatches, triggered by handlers below at precisely the right moment. Imagine watching from down here as the trap opened. You'd see hooves rise into the light, or the claws of a tiger snarling as it emerged. Then the hatch closes, and silence returns. You walk beneath those shafts now, slowly. A shaft of sunlight manages to break through one of them, warming your face for just a moment. It's the first natural light you felt since coming below. Brief, soft, almost forgotten, and then it's gone, replaced again by the hush of earth and dust. You find a flat stone near the edge of one of the cages and sit. The wall behind you is cool, the air unmoving. Somewhere deep behind the stone, water drips, a reminder that the world continues, even here. You let your eyes drift close. The beast gate remains behind you, tall and unmoving. No carts will enter through it again, no wild eyes will peer through its bars. You're not quite asleep, not quite awake, somewhere between worlds and exactly where you need to be. The quiet of the Colosseum's underworld holds you gently, like a blanket wrapped in stone and memory. When you open your eyes again, the light hasn't changed. Down here, it rarely does. But there's something new in the air, a faint scent of metal, smoke and oil. Familiar now. It's the scent of ancient machinery, of torches long since extinguished, and of hands that worked for an audience they would never see. You rise, slowly. Your body has grown accustomed to the chill of the underground. Even the silence has become a companion. You walk again, deeper still. The corridor before you slopes upward slightly, almost imperceptibly. It's leading toward the central spine of the hypogeum, the heart of the underground. You move quietly, step by step, and soon you see it. A long, narrow tunnel lined with carved stone pillars, supporting the immense weight of the Colosseum above, and at the far end of that tunnel, a strange device, towering, skeletal, and entirely still. One of the great lifting platforms. You approach it, eyes adjusting to the gloom. It stands nearly 10 feet tall, with a wide square base and thick wooden beams arranged in a precise lattice. Its ropes are gone, but the hooks remain, large, rusted, and forged by hand. Bronze rails rise along either side of the shaft, guiding the platform's ascent with precision once unimaginable. This was no crude invention. It was engineered genius, Roman design at its most secretive. Every beam, every gear, every counterweight was tested and perfected, not for survival, not for daily life, but for performance, for illusion, for control. You walk around the base of the lift. There are deep grooves carved into the stone where the platform once rose and fell, again and again, over decades. Nearby are the remains of the capstan system, circular wooden drums with iron bolts used by teams of men who pushed in unison, rotating slowly, lifting hundreds of pounds at a time, with only muscle and rhythm. The men who operated them were invisible, faceless labourers in a perfect machine. Above this very shaft, just a few metres overhead, sat the Emperor himself. You imagine him now, draped in purple, shaded beneath a canopy of silk, watching from his marble throne as the lift below released a spectacle, perhaps a gladiator bursting forth, or a wild beast chained in gold, or an actor painted as Hercules descending into view. And as the crowd gasped, as the floor trembled with their voices, no one looked down. No one thought of the dark world beneath their feet. You look up, toward the shaft. Above, the trapdoor is closed. The faint outline of it remains, wood set into the stone floor of the arena. The Emperor's dais would have been just meters away. He ruled from that height, but his games depended on the hidden lives below. You step into the center of the platform now. It's still strong despite the years. The timbers creak faintly beneath your weight, but they do not give. This is where the performers waited, where gladiators stood in silence, hands trembling on spears, waiting to be lifted into the light. You close your eyes for a moment. Imagine the moment just before ascent. The breath held. The stillness. The roar waiting to happen. But down here, no one cheered. You open your eyes again and step back down from the lift. Around you, more corridors stretch into darkness, some sealed by time, others partially collapsed. But the heart of it all, the spine of this forgotten world, still stands. You wander down one of the side passages now. It curves gently, following the shape of the arena above. A long hallway lined with stone benches built into the walls. This was a waiting space, perhaps for those set to rise next, perhaps for the handlers, perhaps for no one at all anymore. You sit on one of the benches. It's smoother than the others, worn by use. You lean your head back against the wall. There is no fear here, only echoes, and those echoes are soft. The roar of the Colosseum never reached this far. Down here, you are below the Emperor's gaze, beneath the noise, past the applause. In the place where everything was prepared, controlled, and made to appear as if by magic. You breathe in deeply, your chest rising and falling slowly, in rhythm with a world long vanished. You continue down the curved corridor, your steps soft against stone that has known centuries of quiet passage. Here the air grows thicker, less with dust and more with memory. The temperature shifts subtly, cooler in some corners, warmer in others, like the building itself is breathing. You pass under a low arch and suddenly the space opens into another chamber, this one filled with forgotten tools. A scattering of bronze implements, iron levers, wooden pegs and bindings, many broken, others neatly stacked against the far wall. On the stone table in the centre of the room lies a long flat board with grooves cut into its surface. A diagram perhaps? A control map? This room once belonged to someone important, someone who understood the choreography of the Hypogeum better than most. This was not the realm of the fighters or the beasts, this was the room of the Keeper of the Keys. You picture him, not a nobleman, not a soldier, perhaps a former engineer or slave granted his freedom. Someone who stayed in the shadows and learned the pattern of the place like a musician memorizing a score. Every creaking gate, every pulley's weight, every trapdoor's resistance. He knew it all. The diagrams on the board are faded but intricate. Circles, squares, rising shafts, annotations in sharp Latin script. You follow one line with your finger and trace the path of a lift from the lower cages to the arena floor. It's like watching a secret unfold. There's a shelf nearby, its wood softened by time, holding several clay tablets and wooden tags, some etched with names or symbols. Tokens for the workers, shift records maybe. A system simple but exact. The Romans loved order, even in their blood sport. On the far wall hangs a set of keys, still resting on rusted nails. Their shapes are elegant, long-necked, with teeth like delicate sculptures. Each one meant for a gate, a cage, a chamber. You take one in your hand. It is heavier than expected. This man, the keeper, may have never set foot in the arena, but he held in his hand the power to open every gate and drop every door. You imagine his role not as loud or theatrical, but quiet, patient, meticulous. He walked these halls with purpose, checking each mechanism before dawn, making sure every trap was armed, every lift ready. And when the games ended, when the crowd spilled out into the streets of Rome, he would still be here, walking the empty corridors, recording what worked and what broke, repairing the secrets beneath the stone. You set the key down gently and leave the chamber, following the tunnel onward. It begins to rise again, gradually, leading toward another central shaft. This one is wider, grander, and bordered by curved stone arches that echo with every footstep. On the walls, faint frescoes still cling to plaster, scenes of myth and combat, painted for the benefit of no audience. They weren't meant for the public. Perhaps they were for the workers, or for no one at all, a habit, a ritual, a reminder that even the forgotten spaces were part of something divine. You follow the path around the shaft. Another lift once stood here, but it has long since collapsed. All that remains is the hole, a deep vertical tunnel open to the upper sky. You look up and see a perfect circle of light far above, like the eye of the Colosseum still watching. There are stone stairs spiralling along the side, narrow, worn. You take them carefully, ascending one slow curve at a time. You pass alcoves, tiny rooms cut into the walls, storerooms, sleeping spaces, places to rest between the shifts of lifting and lowering the spectacle. Some still have woven mats on the floor, others are empty, but for a single stool or a dark clay jug. There is no luxury here, just function. At the top of the stair, the passage forks again. You follow the left tunnel, and soon you're walking beneath a series of large wooden beams overhead. These supported the stage mechanisms. You pass more trapdoors from below, some sealed, some broken, revealing nothing but the underside of the arena. And then the tunnel widens, slowly, into a rectangular hall, not grand, not ceremonial, but wide enough for 3 men to walk abreast, their torches held high. This was a movement corridor, where animals were led, props rolled, performers cued. The walls bear markings scratched in haste, lines, names, directions, sometimes just tallies. Near the far wall is a recess, square and shallow, like a window looking into darkness. It was once a signal station. You imagine a worker standing here, listening carefully for a cue from above, a horn, a shout, a snap of the Emperor's fingers, and then, with swift precision, a response, a torch lowered, a gate raised, a door unlatched, all in time, always in time. The system was vast but intimate, mechanical but human, and even now, long after the ropes have rotted and the beasts have vanished, you can feel the rhythm that once held this place together, not of blood or chaos, but of orchestration. Beneath the Colosseum, nothing happened by accident. You take a final look back at the corridor behind you. The light falls in bands now, slicing the dust with quiet geometry. You walk onward, not because you must, but because the path is waiting. Ahead, something new. A chamber with stairs that lead below the lowest level. Not many were allowed to descend that far, but you are here now. And the Colosseum, even in silence, is not done revealing itself. The stairs before you are narrow and cut directly into the stone, worn down by generations of quiet feet. You pause at the top for a moment, glancing down. The air that rises from below is heavier, cooler, and strangely still, as if even the dust hesitates to stir in that deeper layer. You begin your descent. Each step carries you further from the parts of the hypogeum that were known, even in ancient times. What lies below was not part of the spectacle, not part of the orchestrated chaos that thrilled the masses. This level was quieter, more obscure, perhaps even secret. There are no torch brackets on the walls here, no carved instructions, no guiding lines. You descend by touch and memory, your hand against the chilled stone, your ears filled only with the faint sound of your breath. At the bottom, the stair opens into a chamber so still, it feels like stepping into a sealed jar of air. The walls are low and close. You move through a narrow passage, the ceiling pressing just above your head. The stone here is rougher, untouched by polish. This space wasn't built for display, it was carved for necessity, or secrecy. You emerge into a hidden room, carved deep into the bedrock. The space is circular, with a domed ceiling, blackened and scarred. A ventilation shaft reaches straight upward, too narrow for a man to climb, but wide enough to carry air, or sound. In the centre of the room lies a large flat slab of stone, framed by broken remains of what may once have been a worktable or altar. Along the walls are deep niches, each hollowed out just enough to hold a human figure, and some of them did. You see marks, indentations where chains once hung, rusted iron hoops still bolted into the stone, a wooden bucket turned to soft ash in one corner. You don't need inscriptions to know what this room was. Holding. Not for punishment, not for public spectacle, but for staging. Perhaps this is where men and animals waited before being lifted for the final time. Not in cells, but here, in this place where the walls were blind and no sound of the crowd could reach them. A last breath of silence before the gates opened and the sunlight struck. You walk along the edge of the chamber, your fingers grazing the stone niches. Some have markings, symbols scratched hastily. A cross, a star, a line repeated again and again like someone counting the days or repeating a name. No explanations, just memory carved into walls. And then, one more thing. A tunnel, barely tall enough to pass through, half blocked by rubble. Beyond it lies a space older than the Colosseum itself. It leads into a service chamber, one the builders likely reused from an earlier construction. The Romans often built over what came before, folding old into new, shadow into empire. You crouch and pass through. Inside, the stone changes. It is rougher, darker, flecked with ancient minerals. The ceiling is low and cracked in places. But here, too, are signs of purpose, shards of pottery, a carved bench, a tool buried in dust. Whatever this place was, whether part of a villa or a grain cellar or something religious, it was absorbed into the Colosseum's foundation, and it stayed, silently witnessing every scream and cheer from above, untouched by the years. You sit on the bench and let your hand fall to the floor. The dust is soft, layered thick. You lift it, and beneath your fingers you find a tile, red, broken but decorated. A fragment of something Roman, yes, but something personal, a floor mosaic, perhaps once part of a home. Now lost under centuries of violence and drama. This forgotten room, this root beneath the roots, feels like the soul of the Colosseum. Not the part that entertained or amazed, but the part that held it up. The part that endured long after the crowd left, after the marble cracked, after the empire turned its gaze elsewhere. You leave the fragment where it lies and rise. There's only one way out of this chamber, back through the dark, cruel way, back toward the hypogeum, back toward the machines, the wood, the bloodless gears that still whisper faintly of movement. You begin your return, not as an intruder now, but as a witness. And the Colosseum is not done speaking. Ahead lies more. The prison cages, the trainers' quarters, and something far more deliberate, a place where death was prepared like theatre. You emerge slowly from the low passage, the air warming slightly as you rise again into the structure of the hypogeum. Behind you lies the forgotten layer, still, untouched. But ahead the tunnels feel lived in again, even now. The walls here are smoother. The air carries the scent of long-vanished smoke, iron and leather. You are entering a space not meant for animals or machinery, but for men. Human bodies, human stories, folded into the stone beneath the games. This is where the gladiators waited. The corridor before you curves in a quiet arc, forming a loop that traces the outline of the arena above. It allowed fighters to be led beneath the sands unseen until they emerged through one of the many entrances to the arena, the stage of blood and sand. To your left, a row of doorways carved into the wall, each opening into a narrow chamber. Cells, but not prisons. These were holding rooms, preparation spaces, transition points between the everyday and something else entirely. You step into one. The space is small and simple, just wide enough for a bench of stone and a rack set into the wall. The rack once held weapons, gladii, spears, helmets lined in leather. Most are gone now, but a broken sword hilt remains in the corner, its shape barely visible under layers of dirt. The bench is worn smooth, hollowed in the middle by years of armour pressing down. You sit there for a moment. The ceiling is low, the room strangely quiet despite the open door. You imagine what it would be like to sit here, the murmur of voices down the hall, the scrape of sandals against stone, the rising scent of sweat and oil and anticipation. The men who waited here were not faceless. They had names. They had routines. They trained in the Ludus, the gladiator school, outside the Colosseum, but when the day came, they passed through the service tunnels and arrived here, beneath the stage, sometimes alone, sometimes in pairs, silent, focused. Some were volunteers seeking glory, others were condemned, but here, in this room, they all became the same. You rise and move to the next cell, and the next. Each one nearly identical, spare, efficient, none designed for comfort, but each marked by some sign of presence, a scratch on the wall, a nick in the bench, a name carved in haste with a nail. Felix, Drusus, Petrus, some left prayers, others curses. But none knew which gate they would be called to, which trap door would open, which beast or blade waited above. You step back into the main corridor and continue along the curve. Far ahead, another chamber opens up. A wider space, almost circular, the gathering place, perhaps a final station before the signal came. Here the walls bear torch brackets and one remains intact, a rusted bronze fixture, bent but still holding fast. The floor bears marks too, not of blood, of pacing, circles worn into the stone by sandaled feet, moving in loops, waiting, always waiting. In one corner, something rare, a collapsed crate, and beside it a small clay flask. You pick it up gently. The glaze is cracked. Inside, faint residue, the scent of olive oil perhaps, infused with herbs, a fighter's salve for bruises and wounds, or a trainer's preparation. You place it back carefully and look up. High above, a sliver of sunlight slices through a trap door. The wood is fractured, but the shape remains, a perfect square above this waiting space, one of the gates through which a man would rise. You picture it now. The quiet moment as the platform lifted, the sound of gears turning, the sudden burst of light, the sound of a crowd, rising from silence to thunder in the space of a breath. And the fighter, stepping into that storm. You remain below, in the hush. This is where the decisions were made, not by emperors, not by judges, but by time, by chance, by the slow turning of wooden wheels. Further down the corridor lies another room, larger, with higher ceilings and strange markings on the floor. This was not for fighters, this was for preparation, a staging chamber, where the show's details were whispered and confirmed, its waiting just ahead, and beyond it. The cages were not only for beasts. The corridor curves once more, and the change in the air is immediate. You sense it not with your skin, but in your chest, as if the space itself is heavier. The walls are closer, the ceiling lowers again, and the stone seems darker here. Even the echoes are different, not clean and crisp, but dull, absorbed by centuries of silence. You step into the larger chamber ahead, just as expected. This is no resting place. This is a space of control. The walls here are reinforced, stone faced with brick, and in some places the faint outline of iron studs still marks where structural plates once supported the walls. You pass a pair of stone niches, and within one an iron loop hangs from the ceiling, intact, blackened with age, a shackle ring. It hangs still. This was one of the containment rooms. You don't turn away. You walk in further. To your left, another door, wood long gone, but its iron frame remains fixed into the threshold. The hinges are enormous, meant to hold something heavy, a reinforced gate. Beyond it, a cell large enough to contain more than one body. The floor is sloped slightly, with a gutter that leads into a narrow groove running beneath the wall. It was built to be cleaned quickly, efficiently. This was not for rest. It was a holding space, for condemned criminals, for condemned fighters, for animals perhaps, or all three, depending on the day's design. Because here in the Hypogeum, man and beast were separated only by time and order. You step inside the cell. It smells of old metal and dry earth. No sunlight has touched this place in 2,000 years. The walls are grooved with claw marks, not animals, men. Desperate scratches near the corners, where someone may have tried to wedge loose a stone, or leave a final mark. But not all was desperate. You see it clearly, drawn in charcoal along one stone. An eye. A single human eye. Large and detailed, staring out. It was drawn by someone who waited here. someone who looked through the cracks in the gate and never wanted to be forgotten. You keep moving. Further into the chamber, the cells continue, each one nearly identical, but with small differences that reveal their use. One still holds the rotted beam of a central divider. Perhaps it once held multiple cages. Another has iron rings fixed low into the walls. Those weren't meant for animals. One room is different. Its doorway is wider, its walls plastered, faint traces of red and black pigment still clinging where a mural once was. Not of a god or battle, but of the Colosseum itself. A painted sketch, crude but accurate, showing the arena from the viewpoint of someone below it. The curvature of the walls, the rows of seats, the Emperor's box. And at the very bottom of the scene, a small, square trap door. This room belonged to someone who knew the layout intimately. A planner, a stage master, or perhaps a lanista, a gladiator trainer. Not just a teacher, but a broker of blood. He would have known which fighter was ready, which beast could be trusted, which gate to open, when to lift the curtain of death. You step closer to the painting. At the edge of the arena he has marked something, a small cross painted in red, a signal, a reference, or perhaps just a thought. It reminds you that the Colosseum wasn't improvised, it was scripted, a sequence of suffering perfectly timed. And this room, this quiet cell with its fading mural, was part of that script. You leave it behind and follow the long corridor that runs along the back edge of the hypogeum. The deeper you go, the more mechanical the space becomes. Great wooden beams stretch along the ceiling, once part of the lifting system. They groan faintly in the wind that moves through unseen vents. You come to a wide gate, not broken, not open, still standing. Its bars are twisted slightly, as if something enormous once pressed against them. The hinges are fixed into stone, thicker than any wall you've seen so far. Beyond this gate is darkness, pure and thick. But in that dark lies the largest of the animal cages, the ones reserved for creatures too large to handle with men alone. Bears, lions, bulls, and sometimes more exotic beasts whose names were recorded in whispers. You take a step forward beyond the gate and enter the massive holding pen. There are no windows here, no light from above. But the walls are higher. You can just make out the curvature of the ceiling, shaped like an upside-down bowl. The centre is deeper, a depression in the floor where straw and blood pooled, then drained away. There are feeding troughs at the far end, chains bolted to rings the size of dinner plates. And above you, a single wooden grid still in place, covered in dust. A trapdoor. It opened not onto the arena, but onto a lateral corridor where a beast could be transferred, quietly and precisely, to a lift. A choreography of menace, measured by chains and shadows, and all of it beneath the crowd's feet. They never knew what waited below. They saw the moment of appearance, not the hours of preparation. You turn back now, leaving the dark pen behind. The gate groans faintly as you pass beneath it again, and ahead the corridor curves upward. The next section waits. The prop chamber, the false boulders, the hidden gods, the war machines of wood. Because not all battles were real. Some were myths made solid, and the Romans built their lies with brilliance. The corridor curves gently upward now, and the change in direction feels subtle but sure. You've spent hours beneath the arena, winding through its veins of stone, rust, and silence. But now, a new space awaits, one not of chains or cells, but of illusions. You enter a wide antechamber, framed by stone columns. Their bases are cracked, the mortar crumbling, but the architecture is still intact. The ceiling is low but broader here, creating a sense of pressure that pushes the mind toward focus. Your eyes adjust to the gloom, and you realise you've arrived at a space designed for transformation. This is the prop staging area. You step forward, careful not to disturb the fragments scattered across the floor. Splinters of wood, bent nails, a half-broken wheel. To an outsider, it might appear as little more than debris, But here, you recognise the purpose behind the chaos. Everything here once pretended to be something else. You move past a large pile of rotted planks bound with rusted hoops. Once this formed a chariot, lightweight and theatrical, not built for real battle, but made to look the part from the distant stands. Its paint is long gone, but faint grooves still mark where the wheels once turned. In another corner, leaning against a wall, is a wooden frame shaped like a lion's head, carved in exaggerated features, with grooves where fabric or fur would have been stretched. A costume piece? A puppet? A mask for a man playing beast? Or perhaps a shell to conceal a performer before a staged appearance? The Romans were not always content with reality. They built stories out of death and blood, but also out of wood and rope. You pass a cluster of long poles with blunt iron tips, mock spears, dulled for performance. Some may have been used in rehearsals, others perhaps in choreographed battles where no one was meant to die. But then again, in the Colosseum even the pretend could turn suddenly real. A raised platform stands near the centre of the chamber, surrounded by winches and counterweights. Its surface is scorched, and beneath it lie the remains of oil lamps and blackened cloth. A fire trick, one of the many stage illusions used to recreate the myths of Rome. Perhaps this was once part of the tale of Prometheus, or Hercules, or a titan vanquished in a burning sea of fabric and torchlight. The crowd would gasp. The emperor would smile. And below, in this room, the flame would be extinguished, the ash swept away, the cloth rewound for the next day's magic. To your right, the wall is carved with a faded but deliberate image, an eagle clutching lightning bolts, its wings spread wide. Jupiter, king of the Roman gods. Theatres and temples shared space here with carnage. The Colosseum didn't just feed on blood. It fed on myth, on meaning, on grandeur stitched into violence. This chamber made the gods rise. You walk further in and find the remains of a stage boulder, papier-mâché over a frame of wicker and rope. Shattered now, but it once would have rolled into the arena, splitting apart at just the right moment to reveal a fighter inside, costumed as a divine warrior or monster. You look up. There, directly overhead, is one of the most intricate trapdoors you've seen so far, framed by wooden rails still lined with bronze edges. This one wasn't built for weight, it was for speed, a flash of motion, a miracle, an entrance. In ancient records there are references to sudden appearances, a man leaping from a flame, a goddess emerging from smoke. It was theatre, drama, magic, and all of it built down here, in the dark. You imagine the workers moving through this space, hauling props, testing hinges, whispering directions. Designers, engineers, carpenters, all unseen by the crowd, but vital. The Colosseum was a machine of death, yes, but also of vision. Even war was staged. Even gods had to be cued on time. You pause near a shelf carved directly into the stone wall. A few broken amphorae lie there, once filled with paint or oil or adhesive for stage pieces. Someone used this as a workshop. There are faded brush marks on the wall beside it, colours long since gone, but you can just make out a stripe of gold. Gold, on wood, to catch the light. You step back out into the wider passage and continue onward. The sound changes slightly now. There's more space, more air. You are reaching a central hub again, one where all the illusion, all the preparation, all the chaos and choreography began to converge. This next section is not for props, not for beasts, not for slaves or trainers. It is the last corridor before the lift, the final staging place, where all lines of story, of labour, of life led upward into the sun. The passage opens into a broad, nearly symmetrical chamber. The air is still, thick with time, but carries a faint sense of movement. Not from wind, but from history shifting behind the walls, never quite silent. You pause at the threshold. This room was the final convergence. Every corridor, every holding cell, every preparation nook fed into this space. The walls rise higher here, as if the structure itself acknowledges the significance of what once occurred within. It is not a place of ritual, nor rest. It is where the ascent happened. You step inside. The floor is made of thick interlocking stone tiles, worn smoother than most, polished not by care but by countless feet, paws and wheels. Deep grooves score the ground, tracing where carts were rolled into place, where beasts were led in chains, where fighters stood trembling or stoic, waiting for the platform to rise. Directly above you is a wide rectangular trapdoor. It is open to the air. You can see the pale gleam of the arena floor far above. Sunlight doesn't pour down. It filters, as if hesitant to touch this space that once carried so many upward towards spectacle and death. The gap is large, framed in rusted iron and worn wood, reinforced with bolts and plates now warped with age. This was the primary lift, the largest, the most direct. It could carry animals, props, men, sometimes all at once. Reports from ancient sources describe boars leaping forth beside warriors dressed as Amazons, panthers released alongside actors in the garb of Apollo. It was a performance of confusion, shock, divine chaos. But down here, nothing was chaotic. Everything was measured. Around the edge of the room, you notice marks where the lifting platform once ran. Rails, grooves now empty. Along the far wall, remnants of the capstan system remain. The circular mountings where the winch poles were fixed. Men would have walked in slow circles, pushing in unison, their muscles straining to lift hundreds of kilograms toward the light. No one cheered for them. But without them, nothing rose. On the wall to your left you see something different. Etched, not by tool but by repetition. Dozens of handprints, darkened by oil, dirt, blood, time. Left by those who worked here, who touched this wall for balance, for ritual, for prayer. Some hands small, others large and gnarled. A moment passes. You touch the wall too. It's cold, solid, but it holds warmth in memory. You walk to the centre of the room, where the platform once sat. It's gone now. Only a void remains, filled with dust and fragments of rope and broken beams. But you can feel it. The tension, the stillness before the signal. Above, the crowd would be murmuring, growing louder with each heartbeat, and then the horn would sound. The capstans would turn, the gears would creak, and the stage would rise. You imagine the noise, the squeal of pulleys, the low rumble of the structure, responding to its own ancient body. Then, the trapdoor opening with precision, light pouring down into this chamber, and the people, or creatures, on the platform squinting upward, blinking into the roar. You picture a gladiator there, standing perfectly still, sandals braced, helmet on, sword at his side. He has waited, he has prepared, and now his feet leave the floor. He is lifted into the sun. Behind him, the handlers pull back into the shadows. The workers reset the ropes. The trapdoor closes behind him, and again, the room falls silent. You look around. There are no thrones here, no decorations, no golden reliefs, and yet this was the most important place of all, the final breath before emergence, the point at which performance and mortality collided, fused, and rose. And now, you pass through the last archway beyond it, into a corridor, not for movement, but for watching. A hidden passage. This was where the hidden supervisors stood. Not guards, not masters, but designers, architects of illusion. And what they saw from here, through narrow slits in the wall, was not chaos. It was perfection. A machine that could devour and dazzle at once. The Colosseum was no mere arena. It was a masterpiece of layered control, and you are in its nervous system. Just beyond this passage lies something more. A hidden mechanism, locked behind the false walls. One last secret still waits. A machine older than the myths, a design so complex, even modern eyes would question how it was built. You continue on, with quiet steps, and the Colosseum watches, always. The corridor narrows again, tight, low. The kind of passage that seems designed not for grandeur, but for discretion. You move carefully, your fingers grazing the right-hand wall, where the stone is smoother, almost polished by the routine of centuries. There are no carvings here, no torches, no decorations, only function. You begin to notice something unusual. The shape of the tunnel isn't natural. It twists, curves slightly, then angles hard to the left, even though there's no structural reason for it. You've seen this kind of intentional misdirection before, in temples, tombs, vaults. The kind of construction meant to lead intruders astray, or to keep secrets veiled even from those who helped build them. And then, just ahead, the corridor ends, not with a wall, but with a door. It's different from the others, taller, more carefully framed, reinforced not with thick bars or bolts, but with delicate, narrow ironwork. You can see the marks of hinges, no longer attached, and faint carvings that mimic grain, as if this had once been disguised as part of the stone itself. A false panel, meant to be invisible. You step through into the room beyond. It is larger than expected, circular, again, but perfectly symmetrical, 10 paces across, with a domed ceiling so blackened it seems to vanish into shadow. But your eyes adjust, and you begin to see the truth. This chamber held the master lift system. The original platform, the one around which all others were modelled. Here, you can see the remnants of a radial gear system, teeth carved into the floor in concentric circles, as if the entire room had once rotated. Not fast, not violently, but with power. In the centre, a wide, sunken groove traces a circle. You crouch beside it. The groove is deep, perhaps a foot, and coated in some kind of residue, not oil, not wax, something older, harder, the remnants of ancient pitch, a lubricant for motion. This was not just a platform. It was a turntable, the centre of the Hypogeum's hidden choreography. With it, props could be rotated in full view beneath the trapdoors. Animals could be positioned with precision, sets could shift and unfold. In seconds, the floor above could become a forest, a battlefield, a temple, and no one in the audience would know. Around the edges of the chamber are channels where wooden shafts once ran. The capstans here would not have lifted, they would have turned, rotating the floor like a massive wooden clock. And in the walls, small square recesses. You peer into one. Inside, a rusted mechanism remains, a copper plate, a coil of cord, a notched pulley wheel the size of your hand. It's delicate yet sturdy, a guidance system, one of dozens. This place wasn't known to many, perhaps only to a handful of engineers, men trusted not only with the function of the Colosseum, but with its illusion. They maintained this machine not for glory, but for precision. If the turntable failed, the myth above collapsed. You begin to walk its perimeter. Along the far wall is something even more curious, a niche cut deep into the stone, much deeper than the others. Inside, a wooden chest remains, half consumed by rot. You gently push its lid, and it falls inward with a soft crack. Inside are tools, small, bronze, clearly custom-made. Hooks, scrapers, wedges, folding calipers, and beside them, a bundle of parchment sealed in wax, now hardened and brittle. The seal is broken, but the fragments remain. Not imperial, not military, it bears the mark of the machinatores, the unseen technicians of Roman theatre. These were the original engineers of spectacle, and this room, hidden behind a false wall, reached only by a winding corridor, was their sanctuary. No fighter ever saw it, no slave passed through, only those who pulled the invisible threads that made the Colosseum dance. You sit for a while on the edge of the turntable's groove. The air in here feels untouched, preserved. You wonder how many times the floor above was transformed in mere moments, while here, in the quiet below, the real work unfolded. You can picture them clearly, men with oil-stained hands, faces lined from years in the dark, speaking in whispers, fingers wrapped around pulleys, watching the floor shift like the surface of a dream. And now, centuries later, their machine is silent, but the memory remains. The grooves, the gears, the precision in stone, they speak louder than any voice. You rise and move toward the far side of the chamber. There's one more exit, narrow, sloping upward again. This one leads toward the storage galleries, toward the broken armour, the ruined shields, toward what was left behind when the Empire moved on. You take the narrow passage upward, the curve of the steps pulling you through stone like a gentle spiral, always leading, never quite revealing what lies ahead. The air grows cooler again, the scent of dust and rust, replacing the oils and warmth of the hidden machine room. This part of the Colosseum feels different, less vital, less watched. This is where the arena's past was stored. Not memories, not stories, but objects. Things left behind, broken, or simply no longer needed. You reach the top of the steps and the space opens. A long gallery stretches before you. Not grand, not ornate, just a corridor of function built with storage in mind. Niches line the walls like library shelves, each one large enough to hold bundles of armour, weapons, tools, even statuary. Most are empty now. Others hold the scattered remnants of forgotten uses, shattered helmets, bent spears, the rusted rings of discarded mail. The floor beneath your feet is smooth but marked. You notice deep indentations spaced at intervals, a pattern made by heavy carts wheeled over centuries along the same invisible line. Iron-rimmed wheels that carried weight. Boxes of equipment, armaments, perhaps even trophies of battle. You pause at a wide alcove. Inside lies a pile of warped wooden shields. Their once bright pigments have faded to dim reds and sickly yellows, but the painted forms are still faintly visible. Griffons, thunderbolts, wolves with open jaws, each one once gripped tightly in combat, now collapsed in quiet stacks. Above the alcove, scratched into the plaster, is a name: Tigranus. A fighter, a trainer, a craftsman? No record remains to tell you more. But the mark suggests someone claimed this space. Not grandly, not for glory, just to say, I was here, I did this work. You walk on. There's a feeling in this corridor, something more than silence. It's the weight of utility, of repetition. This was a place no crowd ever saw, yet everything they witnessed depended on what was built, repaired, and stored here. The Colosseum's memory is not in scrolls or statues. It's in the grooves of these walls, the dents in the floor, the rusted hinge that once turned cleanly and now leans with quiet dignity. You reach a second chamber, broader than the gallery. Here the ceiling is arched, with a wide platform at the centre. You recognise its shape immediately: a workspace, a place to lay out armour, to oil and bind leathers, to check weapons for cracks. A small forge once stood here. The remains of its stone frame are still visible in the far corner, charred and lined with a thin crust of ancient black ash. An anvil lies beside it, half buried in dust. A hammer rests nearby. The handle is long rotted away, but the iron head is untouched. You lift it carefully. Its weight is real, heavy, dense with memory. How many times did it ring against steel down here? How many blades did it bend back into shape? You place it down again and notice a narrow wooden rack near the far wall. On it sit 3 broken helmets, each of different make: Thracian, Murmillo, and the smaller round-cap type worn by the Rotirius, the net fighter. The face guards are damaged, one is cracked clean through. None of these pieces were discarded by accident. They were likely meant to be repaired, repainted, reused. The Colosseum was not wasteful, it devoured lives, but it repurposed objects with astonishing care. Along one wall you find something stranger, a row of clay urns, sealed with wax, each marked with a faint symbol. These weren't for oil. They weren't amphorae for wine. These were for preservation. The contents are unknown, perhaps ingredients for stage blood, or pastes used in the repair of props. One bears the Latin word sanguis scratched into the clay. Blood. Real or false, you do not know. But the Romans knew how to blur the line. You pass by slowly, moving toward the far end of the gallery. Here, the air is drier, touched with the scent of limestone. A single shaft of light pierces from a small oculus above, illuminating a niche in the stone. Inside it stands a mannequin. Its form is only partial, limbless, faceless. But over it hangs the remains of a gladiator's chest plate. Bronze, with faint engravings at the edges. Laurel leaves barely visible now. It's bent inward at the side where a blow once landed, not hard enough to kill, but hard enough to remember. You stand in front of it for a long time. You are not watching a relic. You are watching an echo, an outline of a person who once stepped into that light and faced the roar of 50,000 voices. And now the mannequin stands alone, quiet, wrapped in memory. You leave it in peace. Beyond this gallery lies another descent, a spiral narrower than the rest. And at the bottom, the last secrets, the records room, the ledgers of death, the hidden accounts of those who passed through this place and never returned. You follow the spiraling staircase downwards, each step narrowing beneath your feet as the light fades further into shadow. The air is cooler here, heavier, touched by the faint scent of old parchment and dry ink, a whisper of knowledge preserved in silence. At the bottom, the stair opens into a small chamber. The walls are lined with narrow shelves carved directly into the stone, each filled with fragments of what must have been scrolls, tablets, and wooden tablets sealed with wax. This is no ordinary storage space. This is the archive of the Colosseum's hidden history. You reach out to a weathered tablet. The characters are Latin, inscribed carefully, though faded by time. The script records names, gladiators, trainers, and perhaps officials, along with dates and brief notations. Some entries mark victories, others injuries, and a few, the finality of death. The room feels like a ledger of lives lived and lost in the depths below the spectacle. You imagine scribes, hidden away from the crowd's cheers, recording each event with a somber diligence. Along one shelf you find a bundle of parchments tied with a frayed leather thong. You untie it gently. The first page is a map, a detailed plan of the hypogeum, complete with notes about gates, lifts, and trapdoors. Margins are annotated in hurried script. Lion cage secured, Gladiator A assigned here, elevator rope replaced. This was the logbook of the machines beneath the arena. You sense the invisible hands that kept this place running, the watchers who ensured that every lift, every trapdoor, and every cage functioned exactly when it should. A folded scroll lies nearby, sealed with a crimson wax emblem. Carefully you break the seal and unroll the parchment. It is a decree from the Emperor himself, a list of games, participants, and special arrangements for that season. Some names are crossed out, others bear red ink beside them. Death or mercy. You feel the weight of these words, not as cold records, but as echoes of lives shaped by this immense structure. As you carefully roll the scroll back, the sound of dripping water echoes faintly. You look up to see a crack in the ceiling, a thin trickle running down the stone walls. The water has shaped the room as much as the hands of men. You move toward the exit, noticing a small alcove beneath the stairs. Inside is a worn leather pouch. You open it and find a few small coins, Roman sestertii, tarnished and worn smooth, perhaps lost by a visitor long ago, or left as a quiet offering. You pocket one, feeling its cold weight. The ledger room holds its secrets tightly, but also offers you a final gift, a tangible link to those who walked these halls long before you.
You climb the stairs slowly, leaving the chamber behind. As you ascend, the air grows warmer, the sounds of the outside world reaching your ears once again. The Colosseum's hidden depths retreat behind you, but the stories linger, in stone, in rust, in whispered echoes carried by the wind. You step out into the fading light beneath the arena, and the secrets beneath the Colosseum remain, waiting. As you climb the final narrow stairway, the cool shadows of the hypogeum give way to a gentle warmth. The air shifts, carrying with it the faint sense of dust and sun-baked stone from above. Each step brings you closer to the surface, closer to the roar of history itself. At last, you emerge beneath the arena floor, stepping into the dim light, filtering through the gaps in the sand. Around you, the worn wooden planks and iron trapdoors that once opened onto scenes of glory and death lie silent. The arena is empty now, but if you listen closely, you can almost hear the murmurs of the crowd. The distant applause, the clash of swords, the desperate cries echoing beneath the sun. You walk slowly, your fingers tracing the edges of the trapdoors, feeling their rough wood and cold metal. These portals once lifted men and beasts into the blazing spotlight, transforming silence into spectacle. Above you, the open sky stretches wide, blue and endless, a stark contrast to the labyrinth beneath. You pause to take it in. The sun, the breeze, the distant hum of modern life, blending with the ancient stones. Though centuries have passed, the Colosseum's heart still beats faintly beneath your feet. Its secrets are etched into every stone and groove. Not just stories of battle, but of engineering marvel, of careful design and human drama. As you stand there, you feel a profound stillness, a moment suspended between past and present, between darkness and light. You realize that beneath the grandeur, beneath the crowds and cheers, lies a world of quiet toil, careful orchestration, and hidden lives. The Colosseum is not just an arena of death, it is a monument to complexity, to secrets patiently held. And now, as you turn away from the sand and ascend the steps back toward the world above, you carry with you the weight and wonder of what lies beneath. You do not leave the Colosseum, not yet. Instead, you follow a path unseen by most, narrow, tucked behind what remains of the stone seating tiers, where cracks in the architecture give way to passages long forgotten. These weren't meant for slaves or fighters. These were private routes, for the elite, for the emperor. You move quietly, the air shifting around you as the ancient path inclines slightly. Above, sunlight flickers through slits in the wall, high, narrow openings once used for air, not view. You're approaching a part of the structure that loomed above all others, the pulvinar, the imperial box, where emperors sat not as spectators but as gods, and beneath it, a sanctuary, a vault, a hidden chamber where decisions were made before the blade ever touched flesh. You come upon a tight stone stair cut into the foundation itself. You descend only slightly, but the effect is immediate. The noise from outside vanishes. Your own breathing sounds louder, the scrape of your fingers against the wall suddenly intimate. And then the stair ends, opening into a low room beneath the Emperor's seat. You pause. The chamber is not grand, it is modest, but there's power in its simplicity. Stone benches along 3 walls, a mosaic floor, fragmented but still visible, 2 laurel crowns, a palm branch, the face of Mars faded nearly into oblivion, and at the centre a basin carved from white marble, dry now, but it once held water, or oil, or wine, a ritual basin, used not for public ceremony but for quiet, deliberate acts, perhaps libations before the games, perhaps blessings whispered by imperial priests, perhaps blood, poured not on the sand but here, below the seat of power, where it could never be seen, only felt. You walk slowly to the far side where a low door stands half open. It leads into a tiny room, windowless, silent. On the floor a scattered pile of wooden tiles, each marked with names and symbols. Seating arrangements, match pairings, wagers. Here the games weren't decided by fate, they were shaped by hand. The Emperor, seated above in marble splendour, could raise a thumb or turn it downward, but often the decision was made long before the crowd saw it. Down here, in the quiet, in the dark, you find a scroll tube tucked into a wall niche, empty, but still capped with bronze. Its surface is etched with vines and lions, decorative, but utilitarian, like so much in Rome. The air in the chamber is cooler now, with a stillness that feels not abandoned, but preserved. You can almost imagine the whisper of silk robes, the clink of coin, the low voice of a senator murmuring odds, or a scribe noting down names. This is where justice was performed, not debated, where death became theatre by decree. You step back into the main room beneath the box and look up. Above you there is a thin opening, a sound vent, angled so that the voices below could rise into the imperial seat. A whisper sent upward would reach the Emperor's ear but never the crowd's, a private council beneath a public throne. You take one last glance around the chamber, letting your fingers rest on the basin's edge, the cool stone worn by centuries of touch. And then you move on, out through another corridor, one that doesn't rise but sinks once again into the underlayers of the Colosseum. You're returning to the lower Hypogeum, but this time you're heading toward a different region, the training pens, where beasts learned obedience, where men rehearsed their own destruction, a place shaped not for death but for preparation. The silence grows deeper as you approach, and the stone begins to speak again. The air grows thick again, cool and dry as you descend into yet another layer of the Colosseum's underworld. The passage leads you away from the authority of emperors, away from the rumble of crowds and the pull of spectacle. You are heading now into the quiet places. Not the places of execution, but of anticipation. These are the training pens. Not for men, for animals. The floor beneath your feet shifts. It is no longer the finely cut stone of the upper corridors that packed earth and straw, hardened over centuries. The light narrows to a single sliver coming from an oculus far above, casting a soft glow across the ground. You pass beneath a low arch, and the corridor opens into a long rectangular hall. Its walls are lined with small enclosures, each just large enough to contain a single beast. Not cages exactly, pens, holding chambers. The doors are gone now, but the marks remain. Gouges in the wood of the thresholds, scratches on the stone walls. In one enclosure, a rusted chain still dangles from an iron ring, bolted into the floor. The ring is worn smooth where the links once pulled tight over and over. You kneel to examine the ground. There are still faint paw prints in the dust, wider than your hand, three-toed, clawed. Perhaps a leopard, perhaps a bear, perhaps something stranger, brought from the fringes of the empire in ships and chains, gifted, purchased, captured. It didn't matter how it arrived, only that it could be displayed, tamed, released,
killed, or worse, trained. You move to the next pen. The marks here are different. A shallow trench circles the edge of the enclosure, worn by pacing, back and forth, day after day, the animal's root worn into the earth like the stroke of a pen repeating a name too many times. You can imagine the heavy breathing, the flick of a tail, the low growl in the throat of something that no longer belongs to the wild yet never became tame. Further down the hall, you find an object propped against a stone bench, a long wooden pole tipped with a blunt iron hook, a training stick, used not to wound but to command, to push the beast, guide it, intimidate it into movement. Beside it, a round shield, lightweight, painted not for war but for illusion. It bears the faded outline of a stylized lion's head. You realize it was worn not by a fighter, but by a venator, a beast handler, trained not in combat, but in survival. Here, deep beneath the Colosseum, these men prepared. They rehearsed movements. They studied the way a creature lunged, turned, fell back. They choreographed danger. Some venatores did not fight in the arena. They existed here, in the dark, day after day, sweating beneath torchlight, coaxing obedience from teeth and muscle.
You move further along the corridor, into a wider space, a training yard. The floor here is clearer, swept clean even after all these years. Perhaps wind and water have worked together to preserve it. Or perhaps someone comes here still. The yard is ringed with iron bars, not fences, but rails. Inside the ring, the ground dips in the middle, like a small pit. The walls bear faint scorch marks. You realise what it was for: fire training, a place where beasts were taught to tolerate flame and noise, where torches were lit not to burn, but to condition, to ready them for the flash and thunder of the arena above. There is a small alcove on one side of the yard, almost hidden behind a fallen slab. Inside it, dry straw still lingers, and among the straw, bones not human, small, smooth, a cub perhaps, something young brought here to be raised in darkness. You sit beside it for a moment. The silence is deep, not dead but listening. These were not just animals. They were tools, weapons, symbols. But even the fiercest beast was once a thing that breathed and blinked and waited to understand the world. And in this place it was taught to forget the forest, the steppe, the jungle. Taught to rise into the sun and roar when commanded. Taught to die in rhythm. You stand again. The training yard opens into a side tunnel, lower than the others, more natural, almost like a cave. It descends gently toward another system of lifts. But this time you sense the stone changing again. Not functional, not architectural, carved, decorated. You are nearing something sacred, or feared. Perhaps both. A chamber built not for the living or the training, but for the rituals before death. The final gate, where man and beast alike were sent forward into legend. You follow the low tunnel as it gently descends, the floor levelling out beneath your feet as the stone underfoot turns smoother, worn by more than time, by repetition, by purpose. The air changes here. It smells faintly of old incense, like something burned long ago and never truly faded. The passage opens not into a corridor, but into a room shaped almost like a shrine, its ceiling arched and walls carved in shallow reliefs that still speak through the dust. A lion, rendered in profile, its mane stylized like a flame, roars toward a man holding a trident. Below them, the arena floor is etched with the neat outline of trapdoors. This room, this chamber hidden deep beneath the Colosseum, wasn't made for display. It was made for preparation, or perhaps for farewell. This was the ritual gate. Not the grand entrances through which gladiators marched in splendour, saluting the emperor. Not the hidden lifts used to surprise the crowd. This place belonged to the in-between. A final threshold passed through only once. When the sand above had been laid, the crowd assembled, the names written, and the day chosen. A narrow hall leads out from the chamber, and you step into it without hesitation. Along its walls, narrow niches hold offerings turned to ash, burned herbs, fragments of pottery, a tiny bronze figure of Mercury with one wing broken, a god of transitions, of journeys, of messages between the living and the dead. The Romans left nothing to chance. You walk slowly now,
Ahead, you see where the hall rises, merging with a lift chamber, smaller than the others, more focused. This was a direct path from the ritual gate to the arena, bypassing the animal cages, the prop rooms, the noise. Those who passed this way did so alone. Perhaps they were marked men. Perhaps they were condemned criminals given one last chance at glory. Perhaps they were chosen, selected for their final role in a spectacle already written, fated, sealed. A large stone sits beside the lift platform, its top worn smooth. A waiting place. A seat for a man about to rise into the sun for the last time. You step beside it, letting your fingers trail across the surface. The stone is warm to the touch, perhaps from a crack above that lets in light, or perhaps from memory. In the corner of the lift shaft, a narrow groove runs upward, its sides marked with deep scoring. Rope would have passed here, taut and oiled, guided by pulleys above. It would have moved silently at first, then with a rush, lifting the platform into the heart of the Colosseum. You imagine the moment. The chamber hushed, the gladiator kneeling beside the stone, whispering to his gods, or to no one. The creak of the lift beginning to rise, the floor shifting beneath him, and then the sudden burst of daylight, the crowd erupting, the arena swallowing him whole. Here, in this hidden space, the machinery of death pauses. It waits, not out of cruelty, but out of design. This place was where fear was given its own room, where preparation became acceptance, where the rhythm of the Colosseum allowed for breath before the strike. You stay a while longer, listening to the stillness, and then you step back, away from the lift, returning through the carved chamber, past Mercury's broken wing, back into the low tunnel that curves once more into the maze of stone and shadow. There is more yet below. You have not yet reached the deepest level. The final hall awaits, where the builders of the Colosseum left their own message in stone, not for emperors, not for gods, but for the future, for you. The tunnel slopes downward once more, gently at first, then more sharply as the walls close in. The stone here is damp, darker and colder, as though the earth itself has pressed in to reclaim this place. This far below the Colosseum, there are no more designed walkways, no plaques, no organised storage. You are entering the foundation, not just of the structure, but of its meaning. The lowest level, rarely spoken of, barely remembered, and untouched by daylight for centuries. As your steps echo into the gloom, you begin to notice subtle changes in the stone. It's older here. Not the fine-cut blocks of the arena, but rougher, earth-packed limestone, scored with chisel marks that speak of ancient labour, the very bones of the amphitheatre. These passages were carved not for beauty, nor even for utility. They were meant for function during construction, and then forgotten. But they were not entirely empty. You enter a narrow chamber that opens suddenly from the descending passage. It is not large, but it feels different, more deliberate. The walls curve inward slightly, not naturally, but shaped to create an acoustic focus. You test the sound with a soft footfall, and it answers, clearer, sharper, more present. This space was meant to carry voices, but none are speaking now. You turn slowly, eyes scanning the walls, and then you see it, not a relief, not a mosaic, but a simple carving, etched deeply into the rear wall, a set of Roman numerals, and beneath it, a name. Not the name of an emperor, not a gladiator, just a single word, Gaius. The chisel marks are rough, hurried, the kind left behind not as an offering or honour, but as a mark of presence, a signature in stone. And around it, barely visible until you look for them, other names, scattered, faint, scratched into the soft rock over time. Lucius, Tiberius, Clemens, Rufus. Not noblemen, not officials, workers, the ones who built the Colosseum. This was their place. Perhaps a refuge, a meeting point. Perhaps a shrine of their own making, hidden far beneath the grandeur and violence above. You realise standing here that what you've discovered is not part of the arena's function, but its soul. The builders, so often invisible in history, left their names here in defiance of that silence. On the floor nearby lies a fragment of pottery, glazed in a faded cobalt blue, a water jug perhaps, cracked from age. Beside it the broken stump of a candle holder still clings to the dust. Someone spent time here, not just working, waiting, resting, marking their place in the dark. You crouch beside the wall, eyes tracing the names again. You imagine the men kneeling, carving with worn tools, passing a jug from hand to hand, whispering of wages, of families, of blisters and aching backs. The Colosseum was a miracle of design, yes, but it was also the labour of thousands. Slaves, artisans, engineers, bricklayers, people whose names were never inscribed above the marble gates. Except here. This is their monument, hidden, small, enduring. You rise and step deeper into the chamber where the stone begins to narrow again. At the far end, a passage branches into two paths, one leading back toward the lower lift mechanisms, the other descending into what appears to be a natural cavity, unmapped, unstructured. You hesitate. There are no signs, no markers, but the air flowing from that deeper passage is dry, untouched by the breath of centuries. The Colosseum may be above you, but the world below has more to reveal, more than blood and iron, more than sand and applause. Here lie the quiet truths, the ones no audience ever saw. And so you take a breath and step forward, deeper still, into the forgotten earth beneath the Empire's grandest stage. The tunnel ahead tightens almost immediately, forcing you to stoop. The stone loses its hand-cut precision. The shape becomes raw, as if hewn quickly or not at all, like the earth was simply opened and left that way. You press forward slowly, your shoulders brushing the damp rock. There is no light here, no oculus above, no clever Roman engineering to guide airflow or sound, only the rhythm of your breath and the cool press of shadow. And then the ground changes beneath your feet. It softens. You pause, lowering your hand to touch it. Not dirt, not sand, something drier, thicker, ash perhaps, or crushed limestone. It coats your fingers like dust made from memory. You move on, more cautiously now, until the passage opens abruptly. The cavern is irregular, natural yet altered. The ceiling arches in a way the Romans would never have built. But along its floor, someone placed stones deliberately, forming low platforms, walkways, even steps. This place wasn't planned, but it was used. A hidden chamber, beyond even the architect's vision. On the nearest platform sits a small altar of sorts, not grand, just a slab resting on two uneven stones, and atop it, fragments, bones too small to be human, charred pieces of something once living. A circle of blackened tile set around the base. You recognize one of the symbols, a coiled snake, mouth open, tail bitten. The Ouroboros, an ancient mark of cycles, death feeding life. Someone made offerings here, not as part of the public Roman faith, but for something older, something more personal. You step around the altar, eyes adjusting to the soft silver gleam that seeps in from somewhere, maybe a thin crack in the ceiling far above, maybe just your imagination finding light where there should be none. Across the chamber, another set of carvings catches your eye. Not names this time, but diagrams. Crude, yes, but unmistakable. A lift platform, a system of pulleys, a man standing with arms wide while a lion crouches nearby. But then, beside it, something stranger, the same man, sketched again, now beneath the floor, with arrows around him, circling, looping. A diagram of the descent, a cycle not of performance, but of transformation. Perhaps the builders who came here believed the arena was more than a stage, that descending into the depths was not a punishment but part of a ritual, that those who passed beneath the sand didn't just die, they crossed. You move further along the wall, finding symbols etched in uneven rows, Greek letters beside Latin, and older symbols still, ones that look like stars, like water, like serpents and suns. It's a language not of empires, but of mystery. You realize, this place may have served as a sanctuary. Not Roman, not officially, but tolerated in the shadows. A place where handlers, fighters, even slaves might come to beg something greater to watch over them. A quiet corner of the world carved beneath the roar of blood and sand. And in the very back of the chamber, low to the ground, is one final niche. Inside it lies a small figure, terracotta, cracked, the shape of a crouching panther with human eyes. It stares outward into the room, not decorative, protective. You feel no fear here, only weight, the weight of belief pressed into stone where no one would ever see it. You kneel briefly, not to worship, just to acknowledge, and then you stand again, moving toward the far edge of the chamber, where a narrow stone path climbs upward once more. The path is older than anything above. It snakes through the rock like a thought long buried. But where it leads, up or down, you cannot yet tell. Only that it waits. That something, perhaps nothing more than silence, awaits you there. You follow the path as it curves upward, narrow and uneven, carved not by design but by necessity. It winds like a thread being pulled through the earth, slow and deliberate. The stone here is drier, lighter in colour, veined with faint traces of quartz and mineral deposits that glimmer faintly in the gloom. There is no torchlight, no artificial glow, and yet something guides you, a sense of direction deeper than sight. The walls pulse faintly with warmth where your palm brushes against them. Not heat, but memory. The spiral continues for what feels like a long time, not steep, but endless. And as you climb, you begin to sense a shift. The silence changes. It deepens, becomes more than absence of sound. You realize you are climbing not into a chamber, not into another hall, but into a memory preserved in stone. A corridor where words were never meant to echo, where secrets were not hidden, but simply placed here to be forgotten. And then, without warning, the stair opens into a room.
Oval in shape, narrow at the ends, broader in the middle like the eye of a storm carved into rock. This chamber is unlike any other you've seen. Its walls are neither painted nor carved. They are polished, perfectly smooth, the kind of finish only achieved by thousands of hands passing over it, or by a single precise masterful labour. Either way, it feels deliberate, intimate. The space wraps around you, and you are alone inside its memory. At the centre of the room stands a single object, a column, short, thick, made from black volcanic stone. Un-Roman, unmarked, yet it holds gravity in its presence, like it was not placed here to support the roof, but to anchor something far older, something that passed through time untouched. You circle the column slowly. The floor beneath it is different from the rest. A ring of interlocking tiles, dark, red, worn smooth. You count them, 12, set like the hours on a clock. No numbers, no lines, just placement and silence. You remember the diagram from the cave below, the cycle, the turning. Perhaps this chamber is not a room at all, but a mechanism. Not one of wood and rope and iron, but of belief, of memory. A centre point in the Colosseum's anatomy where all movement, all ritual, all meaning converges. You place your hand on the column, it is cold, and then a sound. Soft, distant, metallic, not near, not threatening but real. You step back instinctively, ears straining. The sound repeats, faint, like a hook dragging across old stone, then silence again. You turn toward the wall and find a small recess barely visible. Inside it, another mechanism, a wheel. Small, no larger than a plate set flush with the wall. Around it are tiny notches, each one engraved with a letter, Greek. You brush the dust aside and find a word partially visible. Chronos. Chronos. Time. You turn the wheel gently. It doesn't move, but something behind it shifts. A quiet knock. A hidden release. The chamber doesn't open, it doesn't change, but you feel it again. The sense of being watched. Not by eyes, by history. You realise now this place was not for the arena, it was not part of the machine that lifted lions and men to their deaths. It was deeper, older, a part of Rome rarely spoken of, the memory Rome kept even from itself, a space for the invisible, for the passage of time beneath the thunder of crowds. You leave the column, slowly, passing beneath a low arch at the far side of the room. The stone there is colder, more rigid. The spiral continues, but now it begins to rise faster. You are heading back, though not to where you began. Not yet. The path ahead will return you to the outer hypogeum, to the far side of the Colosseum's bones, to a corridor known only in fragments, where cages move not just vertically, but sideways, where the final secret waits, where the beasts were not just kept, but loosed. The stone path rises steadily now, curving back toward the skeleton of the Colosseum like a vein rejoining the heart. The air changes again as you move, becoming sharper, touched by iron and oil and the memory of sweat. There's a hum here, not of sound but of function, like the space remembers being used, remembers the shouts of handlers, the scrape of iron on iron, the groan of wood under pressure. The corridor straightens ahead,
and you step out into a long hall unlike any other you've seen beneath the arena. It's wider, flatter, and the floor is lined with tracks, 2 deep grooves, carved deliberately parallel, stretching far into the darkness. You follow them. These weren't made by feet or carts. These were rails. At regular intervals you see recesses along the walls, each holding a thick wooden frame reinforced with bands of bronze and iron. They once held cages, movable platforms that could be rolled forward along the tracks. Unlike the lifts, these were not raised vertically, but wheeled horizontally, hidden beneath the arena floor until the exact moment they were needed. From these cages, beasts could be released into central lifts, pushed into narrow shafts that opened into the sand above, appearing to the crowd as if from thin air. You walk slowly along the track, stepping over a shattered wheel still wedged in place, the wood swollen from centuries of damp. Beside it, a rusted hook lies forgotten, curved like a question left unanswered. You come to the end of the corridor, where the rails disappear beneath a heavy stone threshold. The gate ahead once slid sideways, not upward, a great slab balanced on rollers to contain the fiercest of animals. The marks of claws are still visible on the surrounding stone, thin gouges where something once fought against its fate. You push gently on the gate. It doesn't move, of course, but you can feel its weight, the thickness of its seal. Nothing could escape without permission, and when it opened, chaos followed. To your right, another chamber opens, a smaller one, low-ceilinged, with strange patterns on the walls. You step inside. At first it seems empty, but then your eyes adjust. The walls are covered with shallow carvings, not Latin letters, but pictograms, animals, spirals, suns, nets, fire, symbols used by beast handlers to mark the cages. Which creature was within, whether it was hungry, whether it had killed before, whether it had gone mad. You see a symbol repeated 3 times, a jagged spiral inside a circle, a warning. You turn toward the centre of the room. The floor here is stained darker than the rest, not blood exactly, too faded. But something lingers in the stone, a trace, a presence. Perhaps this was where they were fed, where they were chained, where the last quiet moment before violence passed unnoticed, buried beneath the feet of 100,000 cheering souls. You imagine it now, the beast breathing slow and low, the handlers speaking in soft Latin, coaxing it forward, the cage creaking, the wheels turning, and then light, roar, sand. You exit the chamber and continue along a second rail track, one that loops in a tight curve around a central hub, clearly the back end of a lift system. Here everything was timed, coordinated. The cages had to arrive precisely when called. The trapdoor above had to open exactly as the platform reached the surface. Seconds mattered. Delay could mean disaster. Every roar above was an echo of planning below. At the far end of the curve you find another lift shaft, but this one is different. The pulleys are heavier, reinforced. The ropes were thicker. This wasn't used for props or stagecraft. This was built for size, for weight, for elephants perhaps, or for cages that held more than one creature. You look up. Faint light seeps through a rusted grate, just enough to see the outline of the shaft vanishing above into the arena floor. You stand at the base of it for a long while, listening, not for noise, but for the silence that comes after noise, the stillness that settles when something ends. This was not a place of death, it was a place of release, where breath met daylight, where the invisible became real, and where even the strongest lock was just a pause before freedom. You turn back toward the corridor. There is one last route, a narrow, hidden stair buried behind a collapsed wall, marked not with warning, but with caution, a passage known to few, one used not by animals, nor gladiators, nor handlers, but by those tasked with watching, judging, recording. You are heading now toward the observation galleries, buried chambers beneath the seats of Rome's elite, where men in fine robes watched the machinery of death from beneath the sand, where the quiet eyes of power looked up from the dark and made their decisions before the emperor ever lifted a finger. You find the stair behind a fractured wall panel, half buried beneath collapsed masonry and layers of dust. Its narrow mouth opens like a secret kept too long, the steps leading downward in a tight spiral, not toward deeper chambers, but beneath the very tiers where Rome's upper classes once reclined. You descend slowly. The stair is uneven and close, clearly not made for spectacle or ceremony. It was made for access and quiet. At the bottom, the corridor opens into a low gallery carved directly into the stone beneath the podium, the front row of the Colosseum where senators, magistrates and priests sat above the arena's edge. But this space was theirs in another way, more intimate, more private, a place from which they could observe not the crowd or the emperor, but the operation of the amphitheatre itself. The gallery stretches long and narrow, lit faintly by a line of thin slits carved into the ceiling. These slits are nearly invisible from above, hidden beneath rows of decorative marble grates, but from here they allow a filtered view of the arena floor, just enough to see the trapdoors open, the platforms rise, the beasts emerge, and beyond that, the people, cheering, shouting, gasping, while the watchers below said nothing at all. The walls here are unadorned, but smooth, maintained. You can still see where benches were once affixed, low to the floor, the kind of seats you'd take not for comfort, but for duration, for study. This was where scribes sat with wax tablets recording outcomes, where engineers timed the lifts, where priests marked omens in the movement of men and animals, and perhaps where senators, preferring discretion to grandeur, came to see how their decisions played out under the sun. You move along the gallery, running your hand along the back wall. In places, initials are carved, small, discreet. You spot one, SVP. A name, a title, a role? There's no record. That's the point. This was a place for those who left no footprints on the sand, only on the machinery beneath it. You reach a break in the gallery where the stone has fractured from centuries of pressure. Through the crack, you glimpse another chamber beyond, this one circular, set with an oculus overhead and ringed with deep alcoves. You find your way around and step inside. The room is hushed, acoustically perfect, designed not for storage or motion, but for hearing. From each alcove, the arena floor would have been visible through hidden grates, allowing individuals to observe, alone, unnoticed. This is where decisions were made in silence, where the tilt of a hand might mean life or death, where power did not shout, it watched. On the floor lies the rusted outline of a brazier, long cold. Around it, fragments of charred wood and a few bent iron tongs. You imagine the room dimly lit, the air thick with smoke and the scent of hot oil, as men leaned forward to study the stage above, perhaps discussing tactics, perhaps not speaking at all, simply judging. You find in one alcove a scrap of writing, scratched into the wall with the edge of a blade. Nihil est verum. Nothing is true. Below it, fainter still, omnia licita. Everything is permitted. It's not a motto. It's not even a philosophy. It's a resignation, a whisper from someone who'd seen too much for too long. You step back into the centre of the room and look up through the narrow shaft of light filtering down from the arena above. It's a straight line from the sand to your feet, the path that blood once followed after a kill, the line the sun drew across the skin of the executed. From here, it looks small, distant, controlled. And then you realise this is the only place beneath the arena that aligns perfectly with its centre. Everything around it, lifts, cages, trapdoors, gates, they all circle this point. It is the Colosseum's axis, not the emperor, not the gods. This place. This quiet, hidden room where men decided what Rome should see. You remain a while longer, letting the stillness settle, the stone breathe around you. There's one final path now. It leads past the galleries, beneath the outer rim of the amphitheatre, to the vaults where prisoners once waited, not as warriors, but as condemned men. No armour, no glory, just time and silence and the knowledge of what was coming. You turn toward that final corridor and walk. The corridor narrows again, drawing you beneath the outermost edge of the Colosseum, far from the central machinery, far from the roar of lifts and clatter of gears. The air is still here, heavy with damp stone, and something older. Old sweat, old fear, the residue of breath long gone. This is not the part of the Hypogeum built for movement. This place was built for waiting. The passage curves into a long, low vault beneath the northern rim of the arena. The ceiling presses down slightly here, not in collapse, but by design, as if the architecture itself meant to humble those inside. You pass through the threshold and step into the holding cells, stone rooms stacked with iron bars and heavy gates, stripped of all elegance, stripped of all ceremony. These were not for animals, not for trained gladiators. These were for the condemned. You look into the first cell. It is small, no more than a shallow cut into the stone, enclosed on 3 sides and barred at the front. There's nothing inside but a ring fixed in the floor and a worn groove where a chain once rubbed endlessly against the rock. You move on to the next. This one is slightly larger, and here you see marks along the back wall, scratches made by fingernails or stones or whatever could be found. Not words, just marks. Tallies, perhaps, or attempts at memory. You run your hand along them and feel how deeply they were cut. A man waited here. Not for hours, for days, maybe longer. Some of these men were slaves caught in revolt. Others were criminals chosen to be executed publicly, not quickly but theatrically. Sent into the arena unarmed or in mock costumes, or chained to stakes as part of a cruel performance. They were not meant to survive. They were meant to show the power of Rome. You pass a third cell. This one has something else. A slanted wooden beam fixed high across the rear wall, with rusted nails still embedded. From it once hung the costumes of myth, the props used to dress the condemned as figures from fable, Orpheus, Daedalus, Actaeon, so that their deaths could mirror the stories the Romans loved. To the audience, it was theatre. To the man in the cell, it was a script written in blood. You continue down the row. Some cells are empty, some still hold remnants. The collapsed skeleton of a stool, a scrap of cloth petrified with age, a single sandal lying on its side like it had simply been left, and perhaps it had. When the guards came and took the man out, he may not have needed it. There is one chamber larger than the rest, set apart at the end of the corridor. Its gate is still intact, thick iron with a locking bar that's been twisted out of shape like someone once tried to pry it open with tools or brute force. You step inside. It's darker here, quieter. The walls feel thicker, and unlike the others, this cell has a narrow slit at the top, an opening not wide enough to see out of, but enough to hear. You stand beneath it, and you hear nothing. But once it would have carried the sound of the crowd. The opening was placed just right, so the man inside could hear the arena but not see it. Hear the cheers, the drums, the screams. Hear the moment when the gates opened and someone else was sent up, and know that his turn was coming. You close your eyes and try to feel what it must have been to stand here. Days without sunlight, no control, no chance, only the sound of death happening above, again and again, until it was your name they called. And yet, some of them fought, not for freedom, but because it was all that was left. You open your eyes. At the back of the cell, almost invisible in the dark, there's a message scratched low into the wall, where only someone sitting on the ground could have reached. You crouch to read it. I was a man. That's all. 4 words, not a plea, not a curse, just a fact. One that the Colosseum, for all its grandeur, was built to erase. You rise slowly and step back into the corridor. The cells stretch behind you, cold and still. Ahead, the final tunnel waits, one that leads not into shadow, but toward a strange kind of light. You've reached the last curve of the hypogem, where everything turns upward, where the secrets kept in stone begin to unspool, where the Colosseum, for all its spectacle, shows you what it truly was, a machine made of silence and precision and awe. You take a breath, steady, and walk toward it. The corridor narrows one final time, not from collapse or ruin but by design, like a funnel guiding thought toward clarity. You step into it without hesitation. The floor beneath you is smoother here, worn down by centuries of feet that moved slowly, not in fear but in purpose. You are beneath the northern edge of the arena now, but you feel the light changing ahead, no longer just the pale glow from forgotten shafts, but something softer, warmer. The passage leads upward. As you ascend, the walls change again. The rough limestone gives way to carefully placed blocks, not decorative but proud. Their clean, tight seams tell you this was a passage built to last, for movement, for ritual, not for the public. This route wasn't for prisoners or beasts or props. It was for those who walked between worlds, not the condemned, not the celebrated, but the unseen.
You reach a small platform halfway up the incline, where the corridor pauses, widens slightly and splits. To the left, another stair climbs sharply toward the outer arcade. To the right, a narrower route leads into a shallow vaulted space, square, dim, precise. You step inside and feel it instantly. This was a control room, though the Romans wouldn't have called it that. A place where the timing of the games could be shaped, where lifts were monitored, signals given, and mistakes corrected before they reached the surface. You look to the far wall, where a long bronze rod once hung, now green with corrosion still wedged in place, a signalling staff. It would have been raised or turned to cue an operator across the arena floor to trigger a lift, or open a gate, or dim a torch. Communication in silence. Each gesture rehearsed, understood. One mistake, and the illusion broke. Beside the rod lies a block of stone set with a small basin, blackened with soot. It once held oil, not for light but for marking. Below it you find a pile of flat tiles, narrow, rectangular, marked with single characters. They were used to track the sequence of appearances, the order of entrances, the shape of the show. It was all calculated, even chaos had to be arranged. You return to the corridor and take the ascending stair. It rises faster now, curving outward toward the light you sensed earlier. As you climb, the temperature changes. The air grows warmer, the smell of old dust giving way to the faint scent of dry stone, baked in centuries of Roman sun. At last, the stair ends at a half-sealed archway. Its top is fractured, but enough of the shape remains for you to pass beneath. You step into a tunnel that runs just beneath the first tier of seats. It is filled with slanting light from high, narrow shafts. The noise of the modern world is far above and muffled, but you hear it faintly now. Traffic, perhaps, or the faint call of birds circling over the ruins. This was the path used by workers who managed the games, but were never meant to be seen. They moved with efficiency, guided by cues and protocol. They didn't watch, they didn't cheer, they kept the illusion moving. You imagine them now, linen tunics, sweat on their foreheads, slipping behind the scenes to haul ropes, reset platforms, drag the dead away when the sand had soaked too deeply with blood. And here, too, were the men who kept the beast calm in the minutes before the gates opened. You reach a gate at the end of the tunnel, one designed not to lock, but to hold gently, lightweight, retractable, easily moved from one side. It leads into a chamber with a grating above. You look up. It's directly beneath the arena. Light spills in, golden and quiet. If you stood here centuries ago, you would have seen the outlines of the crowd above. Their legs, their feet shifting with anticipation, waiting for what would come next. And now, so are you. Because just beyond this point, the final level rises. A spiral ramp built within the Colosseum's bones, used to transport the heaviest machinery to the highest points. It leads to the last secret, the place where everything began, before it rose into view. The core, the centre of control, where the ropes were tightened, where the great lifts rested, where the entire Colosseum waited to breathe. You turn toward it, heart steady, pace slow. You are nearly there. You step into the spiral ramp, its smooth walls curving upward in a steady incline. The stone beneath your feet is worn, polished by the endless tread of hands and feet carrying loads too heavy for open stairs. This ramp was not made for speed or spectacle, but for strength and endurance, built to bear the weight of cages, platforms, and the great beasts they carried. The air here is cooler, the scent faintly metallic, mixed with the dry dust of centuries. You move slowly, tracing your fingers along the curve of the wall, feeling the careful craftsmanship hidden beneath the rough surface. The ramp narrows as you ascend, the ceiling low but arched, carved with grooves that once guided pulleys and ropes. You imagine the men who worked here, hauling platforms upward, their muscles straining, their faces slick with sweat, knowing that every inch they climbed was a step closer to spectacle, and sometimes to death. The silence around you seems alive, as if the very stones remember the rhythm of labour, the creak of wheels, the snap of chains. Higher still, the ramp opens into a cavernous chamber. The space is vast, echoing with imagined sounds of grinding gears and shouted commands. Along the walls, niches hold remnants of iron fittings, and in the centre, a massive wooden platform lies partially collapsed, its beams rotted but still hinting at former strength. This was the heart of the lift system, the main stage for the machinery that brought the Colosseum's secrets into the light. From here, enormous cages, beasts and even gladiators could be raised quickly.
emerging through trapdoors to thunderous applause. You step carefully across the broken platform, your footsteps muffled by layers of dust and debris. You imagine the pulleys and ropes, the counterweights and levers, all orchestrated by unseen hands to create the illusion of magic. A single misstep could mean disaster, but the system was precise, built with Roman ingenuity and patience. At the far side of the chamber, a narrow stair descends back toward the arena floor, passing beneath thick beams and faded frescoes that once depicted gods and heroes. The air grows warmer here, carrying faint traces of smoke and animal musk. You realize this chamber was not just machinery. It was a sanctuary of tension and power, the final step before the spectacle unfolded. You pause, looking up toward a small grated opening near the ceiling. Through it, a sliver of sunlight filters down, dust motes dancing in the beam like tiny stars. It's a quiet reminder that above, the world goes on, oblivious to the secrets buried beneath. Turning away, you begin your descent, your mind heavy with the weight of history and the whispered stories of those who lived and died within these walls. The Colosseum is more than stone and sand. It is memory, machinery, myth, and silence intertwined. And still, the greatest secret lies just ahead. Descending from the vast chamber of gears and pulleys, you enter a narrow passage that leads deeper beneath the Colosseum's layered foundations. The air here grows cooler again, carrying a faint scent of aged wood and iron, like an old armory long abandoned. The passage widens slightly to reveal a small, almost hidden chamber carved directly into the bedrock, low-ceilinged and intimate, with the faint echoes of footsteps long past, whispering softly in the silence. This was the Keeper's Chamber, a place reserved not for gladiators, beasts or crowds, but for the men entrusted with the operation and security of the Hypogeum's complex mechanisms. You imagine the Keeper here, alert, watchful, cloaked in shadows, overseeing the delicate ballet of lifts, trapdoors and sliding gates. His hands steady on levers and cords, his eyes flickering toward dials and ropes, ensuring every movement below the sand above happens without a hitch. The walls of the chamber bear faded markings, scratchings and notations, a primitive ledger of sorts, tracking the rotations of platforms and the timing of lifts. You see a crude calendar carved into one wall, counting days, months and festivals when the games would peak. The Keeper marked time not by hours but by spectacle. Every signal, every cue was his domain. In one corner, a worn leather satchel rests on a stone shelf, its surface cracked and fragile. Perhaps it once held keys or tools, perhaps tokens of authority, or maybe a small talisman for protection. You lean in to touch it, but it crumbles softly, dust mingling with the thick air. Near the chamber's centre stands a simple stool, its wood splintered but its shape unmistakable. You imagine the Keeper seated here during long nights before the games, fingers twitching with anticipation or fatigue, ears straining to catch the slightest sound of tension or release from above. A faint noise stirs, water dripping somewhere beyond the chamber walls, mingling with the distant roar of the city. Outside, the marble steps of the amphitheatre gleam in the fading sun, but here, in this hidden chamber, time is measured by the pull of ropes and the sigh of stone. You trace the carvings again, reading the cryptic notes and symbols, an unspoken language of gears and strings, an ancient code to control chaos. The Keeper's realm is silent and unseen, but without him, the spectacle could never rise. You step back from the faded ledger and look toward the narrow stair that leads upward. It curves back toward the arena floor, toward light and life, toward the roar and thunder waiting above. Yet the chamber lingers in your mind, a reminder that beneath every grand show there are countless hands, eyes and hearts working in shadows. You ascend slowly, leaving the Keeper's chamber behind, carrying with you the memory of those who shaped the unseen movements beneath the Colosseum's blazing sun. You climb the final steps from the Keeper's chamber, the air growing warmer and lighter with each pace. The stone beneath your feet is smoother here, shaped by countless feet moving swiftly to prepare the arena for the next spectacle. The tunnel opens onto a narrow platform just beneath the wooden floorboards of the Colosseum itself. Above you, the faint creak of timber echoes softly, a reminder that the entire amphitheatre, though monumental, was also a living machine, made of wood, rope, and stone. Here lies the last threshold between the hidden world below and the brilliant stage above. The trapdoors, lifts, and sliding gates converge just beyond this point, each one carefully balanced and timed to create the illusion of sudden appearances and vanishings. The floorboards above bear faint scratches and scorch marks, evidence of fires lit beneath for smoke effects or to heat the metal mechanisms. The scent of aged timber and rusted iron lingers in the air, mingling with the dry dust of centuries. You run your fingers along the edge of a trapdoor, feeling the rough wood grain and the metal hinges worn smooth by endless use. The mechanism beneath is still intact, an intricate system of pulleys, counterweights and levers designed with precision to lift cages and platforms swiftly and silently. The weight and balance of the entire Colosseum rested on this engineering marvel, hidden from the eyes of spectators but vital to the spectacle's success. Looking down through a small grate beside the trapdoor, you glimpse the vast hypogeum below. The twisting corridors, the cages, the shafts, all interconnected like the veins of a great beast. This labyrinth was a world unto itself, where life and death intertwined in shadow, far from the cheers and gasps above.
Beyond the platform, narrow stairways lead back toward the arena's outer edges, where gladiators waited in the shadows, and where beasts stirred in cages just moments from release. The final secret of the Colosseum's underworld is not in the machinery alone, but in the lives bound to it. Those who moved unseen, who controlled fate with every pull and release. You take a deep breath, feeling the weight of history settle softly around you. Above, the sun filters through the open arena, casting long shadows that dance with the whispers of forgotten voices. The Colosseum stands as a testament, not just to Rome's grandeur, but to the invisible world beneath, the world of elevators, trapdoors, and cages in the dark. You step back slowly, retracing your path toward the exit. The silence beneath the amphitheatre embraces you, a quiet companion as you leave the secrets of the hypogeum behind, carrying with you the memory of the ancient machinery and the shadows that once breathed life into the greatest show on earth. The last corridor is straight, long, and utterly quiet. You walk slowly, your footsteps soft on the worn limestone path, heading away from the core of the Colosseum's underworld. Behind you, the platforms rest where they were left, centuries ago. The ropes hang limp in forgotten shafts, and the shadows settle once again into the shape of silence. But ahead, just visible now at the end of the tunnel, is the light of the open sky. It's not bright. The sun is low, sliding behind the jagged skyline of ancient Rome. Warm amber light pours through the archway, painting golden dust across the corridor walls. You approach it like a pilgrim returning from a hidden shrine, carrying a story no one else will see, a truth too heavy for spectacle. You step out into the ruins, the great circle of the Colosseum rising around you like a broken crown. Its walls are quiet now, its seats empty. The floor above the hypogeum has long been exposed, open to time and weather, no longer covered by the wooden planks that once hid the machinery of fear and awe. From here, the skeleton of the amphitheatre reveals itself completely. The stone ribs of the tiers, the great archways, the scars left by centuries of earthquake, fire, and repurposed stone. But even stripped of its grandeur, it breathes. You turn and look back toward the hypogeum entrance, that narrow slit of darkness beneath the main arena. It seems small now, just a gap in the earth, yet beneath it lie miles of corridors, shafts, chambers and secrets. Rooms that held beasts, men, fear and power. It was more than just a foundation. It was the soul of the Colosseum, a place where death was designed, where myth became movement, where the invisible hands of labour, precision and ritual shaped every gasp, every scream, every silence. You close your eyes and hear it one more time, not the crowd, but the creak of a cage rolling forward, the low growl of a lion in the dark, the sharp signal of a pulley ready to lift, and above it all, the hush of a crowd waiting for the trapdoor to open. But now, the gates are closed, the ropes have frayed, the sand is still. You open your eyes again and look out across the empty circle. You know now what others only guess. The Colosseum was never just a theatre of cruelty or triumph. It was a world behind the world, a labyrinth where shadows had names, where stories were written not in ink, but in iron and blood and breath. You take one last step into the fading light. The stone is cool under your feet. The breeze carries the faint scent of cypress and dust. You have seen what few remember. You have walked through the veins of an empire's heartbeat. And though the crowd is gone, the beasts are silent, and the emperor's long dead, the machinery beneath the Colosseum still waits, quiet and hidden,
for someone to remember that even the grandest illusions are built from darkness and depth. You turn away at last, and leave the Colosseum behind, but it does not leave you. Sleep well.